Hello, hello, hola, hola, amigos, amigas, bienvenidos. Welcome to Lima, Peru once again. Welcome to my home and to another historic event, event from the past, an event from the time in particular when, well, these two worlds clashed here in South America, the Inca and also the Spanish, the European, uh, each one with their own culture, with their own faith, religion, language. And in particular, today we are traveling back in time to a specific location in Peru, quite close to my city, to Lima, actually within the city of Lima, but close to where I live. The name of this site is Pachacamac. So we will talk about, well, the day the conquistadors destroyed the god of the earthquakes. And today's event is basically about the destruction of a deity, a god worshipped back in pre-Hispanic times in South America, worshipped by the Incas, but also by ancient society. The name of this god is Pachacamac. It still actually exists and is reverenced and venerated also by some groups pro, let's say, indigenistic groups, because there is sort of like a revival in this time of the traditions and the religion of our ancestors. So we will talk about the destruction of the oracle of Pachacamac. My name is Vanessa, by the way. If you are new to my event, be welcome also to my event. Welcome to, let's say, any other future events that I will be doing. All of them are about history. Most of the times is about pre-Hispanic history, is about colonial history also. This is the era, the two eras, let's say, which are quite big, quite great, of Peruvian history that I'm fascinated the most. But also I talk about like contemporary history, Republican history, and I'm planning also to do some events about that for the future. So I'm a tour guide. I work since 2006 as a local tour guide in Lima, but also been able to travel a lot in the country. And I think that has given me a quite wide view of Peru's history and reality also. Well, so now I would like to first give you a bit of my sources based basically on the authenticity, of the narrative related with the destruction of the oracle of Pachacamac. Pachacamac is mentioned in the first accounts of the conquistadors who accompanied Francisco Pizarro in this process of, well, the conquest of the Tahuantinsuyo. By the way, I want to clarify for those that are completely new to Peru's history, especially to this epoch, that Peru, the name Peru, and the country of Peru is in fact a creation of the Spaniards, because Peru didn't exist in that way, even named like that, in the time of the Incas or pre-Incas. Okay, so the territory that was dominated by the Incas was referred to as Tahuantinsuyo. Tahuantinsuyo. So later we'll talk a bit more about the Tahuantinsuyo, but I think the most accurate, most important, let's say, account of the destruction of the site of Pachacamac and the oracle and the god of Pachacamac is the one of Miguel de Estete. Miguel de Estete was a conquistador who actually accompanied Pizarro in the destruction of many sites. He was a witness of the capture of Atahualpa, King Atahualpa, the last Incan king, let's say. Later we had some other Incan kings, but they were puppet kings. So he married an indigenous princess, also an indigenous high status woman, as what was the fate of many of the destiny of many of the companions of Pizarro. Pizarro himself married an Incan princess. So, well, the chronicle of Miguel de Estete is very important, it's very relevant because he narrates, he tells the story of the Spaniards in this territory and also their experiences in this new land, in this new soil. So he mentions Pachacamac. He mentions the oracle of Pachacamac, the size of Pachacamac, and also who this god, this devil, because remember that we are talking about the conquistadors, we're talking about the Spaniards. And the Spaniards in this new territory classified of diabolic any gods that were present here, or most of them were considered by them as diabolic, as evil. Okay, there was a tremendous misunderstanding of all of the rituals, the local rituals, and the deities. So back to Pachacamac, I wanted to give you, well, an idea of how Pachacamac was perceived by the locals in this sort of like a caricaturesque form. But also the image on the right-hand side is an approximation of what we think is the the god of Pachacamac, the idol that was worshipped by these people. And Pachacamac is quite a curious deity because, according to what specialists believe now, it was a god that had two faces, one in front, one in the back, probably related with the idea, first of all, of the duality, the sacred duality that the people from the ancient Peru, the pre-Hispanic Peru, they believe in, they relate in, they consider to be the most important, like let's say, value of their existence, because without duality, without what's female and male, life couldn't exist. So Pachacamac comes from a Quechua voice, Quechua words. Pacha means earth, and Camac is Lord of. So the Lord of the earth. But in a more profound way, Pachacamac is the maker of the world, is the creator of the world, is the one who animates the world also. Okay? So later we're going to focus in the description of the god, but just want to give you a little idea of who Pachacamac was or is for those who believe in this deity. The pantheon of the Incas and the pre-Incas was great, was huge, was a collection of deities that were created by the first humans who inhabited this territory, the central Andean territory, the central Andes of South America. Since, let's say, the first societies, Caral is 6,000 years old, so even before that time. So many of these gods evolved little by little, changed names over the time. And one of the most important legends about Pachacamac is that he defeated a local god, a more ancient god named Con, K-O-N. So Con, seems, according to this narration, this narrative, was a god who was quite evil also. He was not really a good god, but to be very honest, most of the gods from the pre-Hispanic times were not like pure goodness. No, they were not just like angelical figures. No, many of these deities were quite temperamental. No, and pretty much like humans, as humans. They had their good days and their bad days. No? So, according to how humans treated these deities, they treated back them. So, Con, a very old god, older than Pachacamac, was a creator of a first humanity. This is according to the legend. But it seems that he got quite mad with this humanity, and he started to like punish these people. So Pachacamac came and he realized about the evil way Con treated this humanity, and he decided to defeat, of course, Con, and he also creates a new humanity. Pachacamac is a creator of a new humanity, and this is us, actually. This humanity is us. So we see, well, the defeating of Con by Pachacamac. And Pachacamac and Con actually coexisted at some point in their, let's say, as gods to different peoples. For example, in the south of Peru, in the region of Ica, the Nazcas, creators of the Nazca line, they were worshippers of Con. In some locations, some gods continue prevailing. In some locations, they disappear, and all the gods took over. Pachacamac also has a other side, let's say, its counterpart, as all of the elements in the Andean world, in the Andean cosmovision, there's always let's say, a part that is a part that is male, or a part that is up, another one is low, or another one, for example, could be related with the sun, another one related with the moon or the nighttime. So Pachacamac inhabited the coast. He lived in the coast. So its counterpart was Pariacaca. So Pariacaca is an entity which is usually associated as masculine, which inhabits the mountains. And there is a very important mountain actually named Pariacaca. Pariacaca mountain is close to 6,000 meters above sea level, 5,750 meters above sea level. Is huge. It's very, very high, this mountain. By the way, in Peru, we have some really, really high peaks, over 6,000 meters above sea level. So, seems that also this idea of duality was transmitted also in fields related with, for example, elevations, mountains, the peaks of the mountains, and also the flats and the zones close to the sea. Okay, Pariacaca and Pachacamac were the two most venerated deities in the central coast Andes of the country. Here is where Pachacamac lived, and Pachacamac, this energy creator, the lord also of the earthquakes, lived in the coast. And it makes complete sense to me as a local, as a Limanian, that here in the coast of Peru, we venerated a god associated with earthquakes, because we have earthquakes all the time. Earthquakes that sometimes can be so destructive. In, let's say, the history that is recorded, this is since the arrival of the Conquistadors, because before the Conquistadors, probably there were some writing systems that we don't know, we don't understand. So that's why we cannot read those forms of scripture from the ancient times. But from the arrival of the Conquistadors until now, we have evidences and recorded information related with earthquakes that were so destructive. For example, the one of 1746, which was some say 9 Richter scale earthquake. So that's why in this location is where we have a god where, let's say, he controls the earthquakes. A god who controls these movements. Okay, so and what you see in there in the picture is a view of the Temple of the Sun in the archaeological site Pachacamac, the physical place where the god was worshipped, and also islands. Those are known as the islands of Pachacamac. So this location also is so special. It's looking to the ocean. It's close to. It's basically a desert, ending desert into a valley. Right next is a river. Behind are the mountains. So it's a sacred location. Back to the story of the arrival of the Conquistadors, because we have to catch them now, and what they were doing after they arrived into this territory, after they started the quest into, conquering the territory that, now we know as Peru. And they were just starting to understand. They knew there was a sovereign. They knew there was a king, and they marched in direction to this king. And well, these people, they were just 168 conquistadors, few of them in horses. Also, they were quite brave, no? Well, the Inca Atahualpa was accompanied with thousands of indigenous that were completely like dependent on the Inca, considering the Inca a deity, a living deity. But that was not enough, basically, for ensuring his safety, because in Cajamarca, in November 16 of 1532, Francisco Pizarro took prisoner the king. And well, this event deserves its own, let's say, webinar. So let me know if you wish me to explain more about the moment when the king Atahualpa was captured by the Spaniards. But long story short, well, Atahualpa remained prisoner of the Spaniards for months, for several months. Well, the moment when Atahualpa was captured by the Spaniards, the conquistadors, actually, like, his biggest preoccupation was not being in the hands of Pizarro, because he knew he had many more people in the empire to come and rescue him. And that's something that we don't understand really, why he didn't ask this many people to to come immediately and rescue him. But probably it was his, I don't know, like his wish to learn more from the Spanish, his curiosity to live, to coexist with them, who, like, let's say, kept him there with them. Okay, and in this process of coexisting with the Spaniards, he realized that the Spaniards, like, were crazy about gold. He realized that the Spaniards needed gold, and he offered gold in exchange of his freedom. Okay, so he offered one room. By the way, the room exists in Cajamarca. If you ever come to Peru and you want to really go off the beaten path, go to the beautiful Cajamarca. It's an incredible site. So there is where the Inca was retained. And he offered a room that was about 7 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 2.5 meters high, full of gold, and two of the same size full of silver. We're talking about tons and tons. It's very hard to calculate how much gold can fit in a room like that. But he offered like one room of gold, 2 rooms of silver for the greedy Spanish, because he realized that they were greedy, and right away he realized they were not gods. They didn't eat gold. It was like just something they considered valuable. So probably what he did, offering this gold, was gaining some time. Because in the meantime, while he was captured, like, he committed a big crime, which was killing his brother. He ordered his officers to kill his brother Huáscar, who was in his possession. Okay, and why? I mentioned already that his biggest worry was not the Spaniards. His biggest worry, because he believed he will be free soon from this captivity, was to get rid of than in the Spaniards. Okay, so well, we have some interesting sites like in the territory that were very rich in gold, and remember that well, this authority, this king, offered gold to the Spanish. So he needed to collect so much gold, tons of gold, to accomplish taking his own rescue. No, so the place, the number one site from where most of the gold came out to Cajamarca was Cusco, and in particular a building that is known as the Coricancha. Cori means gold, so the temple of the gold, which nowadays looks like what you see in the picture on the right-hand side. This is the Church of the Dominicans in Cusco. It's such a beautiful church. And there you can see the foundations of the Incan stone and also the Spanish techniques of construction right on top. But on the left-hand side, you can see how possibly nobody really knows exactly how the site looked and how it was, like the amount of gold around it. But this is how we believed like it was. Like there were animals made of gold around, like trees made of gold. The dindles were covered in gold. The walls were covered in gold. So imagine, no? So but also, I would like to mention, no, like something really interesting related with Pizarro and Atahualpa conversing, talking basically about like, well, this offering, this quite like let's say beneficial offering from Atahualpa to Pizarro of giving them gold, like so easy, no? Um, and especially Pizarro was quite surprised when Atahualpa mentions, no, that he would give the gold from one of the most important oracles in this territory known, the Oracle of Pachacamac. No? So in the conversations they had, no, like once they became quite good friends, because so far we know they had a very good friendly relation, Pachacamac, Pizarro and Atahualpa. So Pizarro asks to Atahualpa, why you're giving us the gold of Pachacamac? Aren't you afraid of Pachacamac because he was a god? No? So Atahualpa answers with a very interesting story, no, that is also noted on the chronicles. No? He mentions, first of all, that Pachacamac is a liar. He describes immediately. Okay, so it was not really a good idea to be exposed to the sun. Okay, so first lie. Well, second lie happened when actually Huáscar, the enemy, brother and enemy of Atahualpa, sent his also representatives, emissaries to Pachacamac, asking if he will win the war against Atahualpa, his brother. And well, the priest returned with the information saying that Pachacamac said that Huáscar would win, and actually he lost. The winner was Atahualpa, and that's what Atahualpa said. He was a liar. Second lie. Okay, and then, well, the third lie is related with Atahualpa himself. He explained to Pizarro that he asked also to Pachacamac, who will win this let's say fight between Atahualpa, no? Still, I have Pachacamac in my mind. So before the death of Atahualpa, months before, because remember that he died on July. So we are talking about, well, the end of the year 1532, beginnings of the year 1533. The Spaniards are now willing to collect the money that was offered, or the gold that was offered by the Inca, no? So they knew that the Incas had a very good trail known as nowadays as the Inca Trail. Its Quechua name is the Capac Ñan. You can see the name in the upper part, which means Trade of the Lord or Main Trail. Capac Ñan. Capac means Lord. Okay. So this trail is very, very long, and it was included in the UNESCO's list of World Heritage in 2014. So the size of this Capac Ñan, of this Inca Trail, is huge. Well, first of all, the Incan Empire, the Tawantinsuyo, which cover about 6 countries, or part of 6 countries of nowadays, part of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina. This Tawantinsuyo was huge, 2.5 million square kilometers. Huge country. And the element that kept that country or glued together that allowed the Incas to move like militia, like any minute necessary, or also continue the expansion of territory, and especially that ensured that products will move from one side to the other, was this Inca trail. Okay, the trail had about 30,000 kilometers long, and this is the same trail the Spaniards used to come into Cusco, into Lima, into Pachacamac, for example. So this trail was used for them in their benefit, indeed. No? So first of all, the Spaniards, they had already Atahualpa captured. Okay, so Atahualpa was in Cajamarca. If you later see in the map of Peru, if you wish to continue doing your investigation about this topic, the map of Peru, Cajamarca is in the North Andes. Okay, it's a beautiful location, but quite distant from Pachacamac, the physical site where the existed. So Francisco Pizarro considered that the recollection of the gold promised by the Inca should be monitored by the Spanish. Actually, it was a really clever decision on their side because they would know from where the gold was coming from. And they knew that the gold was kept in very important cities. So this will be beneficial for them in the later process of expansion in favor of the Spanish crown in this territory. So remember, this land was unknown completely, okay? So, Pizarro realized also that he couldn't be the person going to recollect the gold. He had to be with Atahualpa. He had to remain controlling Atahualpa. He didn't rely in anyone. Well, he relied in some people. And I think that the person chosen for this task to monitor the recollection of the gold was probably the most beloved and most trusted person for Pizarro, which was his brother. Okay, so that's the reason why Pizarro didn't do this on his own. He left the work into his brother's hand, and later we'll talk about this. Okay, so the closest city first the Spaniards went in before Pachacamac was a site that is known as Jauja nowadays. Later became also the first capital of this territory before Lima, by the way. Many people don't know this. Lima was the second capital chosen. The first one was Jauja, okay? And, the Spaniards went in that direction, and later they took the trail, the Inca trail, from Jauja towards Pachacamac. Okay, so they moved from the Andes. They first penetrated into the Andes. They walked the Inca trail of the Andes, and later they took the secondary trail to the coast. Okay, and this Inca trail was the only trail that they could use. There was no other way to do it. Okay, so the distance between Jauja and Pachacamac is about 200 kilometers, done by Inca trail on foot because the Incas didn't have horses, so it was just done by foot. It took about 10 days, and that was the time it took to the Conquistadors, because the Conquistadors, even though they had horses, these trails were not designed for horses. They were like cobblestone. They were good for walking, for llamas also carrying some burdens, but not for horses. So they had to do it partially on foot, on feet, on foot. So here you can see, the brother of Francisco Pizarro, Hernando Pizarro, and Pizarro is quite a controversial character. He is recalled as, first of all, a very smart man, very, very smart man, a man who also was literate, which was not really the norm of that time. The very conquistador Pizarro was illiterate. Also, another thing Hernando Pizarro was that Francisco wasn't, was that he was a legitimate son of his father. So the relation they had, Pizarro or Francisco and Hernando, was that they were half brothers. Okay, they were half brothers from father's side. So Hernando was a legitimate son of Gonzalo Pizarro, father of both, right? So even though Francisco was older. So, well, he was a very smart man, very intuitive, but also quite evil. He is presented as a quite evil person, okay? So, well, this was the man who had, well, in charge 20 horsemen to go with, of course, a bunch of indigenous who were translators to go to Pachacamac. And they had to go through these trails that were, as I said before, like only able to be like walked by people or llamas. This is how the part in the Andes looks like of this Inca trail or Capatñan. By the way, when we just put on the Google search, for example, Inca Trail, the Inca Trail that will pop up is just a very little part of the general Inca Trail. That is the one that goes from Ollantaytambo to Machu Picchu in Cusco. Okay, so we refer to the big trail, to the Capatñan, the great one, which also was here in this part of the country. And in the coast, the Inca Trail looks more like this, and we can imagine the conquistadors, seeing these changes of geography and getting closer to the sea, to the deserts in the sea, and seeing, well, sometimes even not seeing the Inca Trail, just the locals knew where the trail was. And when they approximated into the archaeological site, now we call it archaeological site of Pachacamac, but they knew it as an oracle. They started to notice that the architecture in the coast was all made in mud. This is one of the first pictures, by the way, made from the archaeological site of Pachacamac at the end of the 19th century. And well, you can see, of course, the state of destruction of the site, but still noticing the mud walls of this location. By the way, this is a part of the Temple of the Sun. So another thing they noticed when the Spanish came in this location was that, and this is in the distance actually, probably in a quite like a elevated viewpoint of the Inca Trail, getting into the Oracle of Pachacuti, is that the city has lots of temples and also walls. And we have also evidences still in these days of those walls. Have been identified 4 murallas or walls. And here I mark also in different colors. We have the 4th wall in red color, the 3rd wall in blue color, the 2nd wall, we're getting closer, and so in the green color, and finally a fragment of the 1st wall in yellow color, which also shows that there was locations for purification. So the walls guaranteed also that the pilgrims who came into the oracle were purified enough. They fasted also the time necessary to be in the presence or feel, let's say, the god of Pachacamac. So all of these rituals of cleanse and, let's say, purification are marked in the chronicles also of that time, especially the one of Miguel de Estete. So, and of course that the Spaniards didn't have time to fast. They didn't have time to not eat chili, not, for example, eat salt, do the, let's say, sacred cleanse, body cleanse, that was also associated with getting into this sacred territory. They skipped all of that. They had a VIP access that not even the most important governors of the Tahuantinsuyo had. Like anyone who wanted to be in the presence of Pachacamac, of the god of Pachacamac, well, had to be clean and had to do purifications, which were like very intense. We know that some of these purifications needed to be carry on for a space of 1 year if you wanted to be able to pass the first wall and get into the territory where the temple of Pachacamac was. So what we see here in this picture, this is a view you can also get from yourself if you visit the archaeological site of Pachacamac, is, well, the Inca Trail inside the archaeological site. Notice that the Inca Trail looks like a corridor, right? Because this Inca Trail had walls, and probably in some parts was roofed. And also, far, far in the distance, you can see one wall also. So this is the third wall that gets into the side, and you can see the little like gap opening that was the entrance that probably was custodied by guardians. So the Spaniards, as I said before, they got in without any restrictions, with the intention of course, taking the gold. But also, we know that, well, there were other intentions, not revealed. So, first of all, Hernando Pizarro had to recollect the gold, had to also see the amount of temples, or the amount of people going into this place. But also, he had one more order, which was destroying the god of Pachacamac. And this order was not revealed, of course, to the people accompanying them. But it has to be done. So once they got into this territory, they learned about many legends associated with this site, and many gods also. The Incas worship thousands of deities, and most of them, when I'm talking about the Incas, I'm talking about, well, this society culture known as the Inca culture, but there were many other cultures that coexisted with the Incas at the time of the arrival of the Conquistadors, and also many that existed before the Incas. So the Incas, who just existed for a space of 300 years, basically, as a society, expansionist society, and their last 100 years were of mass expansion. So the Incas, in their process of expansion, annexed deities also, people and their deities. So we have, for example, the legend of Cuniraya and Cavillaca, one of the most famous legends of this site. Also, these legends, in a way, emphasize in the importance of this place as a sacred land. So Cavillaca was a princess, Cuniraya was a god. Cuniraya was completely in love of Cavillaca. Cavillaca didn't want to be in love of anyone. She didn't care of love. So he, in a way, forced a form of relation with her, converting Cuniraya into a bird, depositing his, let's say, his seed into a fruit that fell down over her while she was resting. This beautiful fruit looked so delicious. He ate it. She got pregnant. And later on in the story, like when she discovers the god Cuniraya was the father of the child, but she didn't know exactly who was Cuniraya, because he presented in the shape of a poor man, of a let's say man with ragged clothes. She was so sad, ran away from him, and she didn't know that he was the big god. No, she suicide actually, turning into the islands of Pachacamac. So what we see here is, for example, the big island is Cavillaca, and the little island is her child who died with her. And of course, because they were magical also creatures, they turned into islands. We have other legends, like for example, the one of Urpihuachac, and Pachacamac site is very important in the mythology of the indigenous people, because it was a site where the first fishes were kept in a little lagoon that belonged to the goddess Urpihuachac, which was the wife of Pachacamac. And Cuniraya, this god, again, he got into this site, and he took the fishes of Urpihuachac and he put them in the sea. So that's why we have fishes in the sea. So that's why also the fishermen worship Urpihuachac, and originally also Cuniraya. So, well, this is the archaeological site of Pachacamac. Now, going into details related with this site, Pachacamac is quite a big place. I'll give you a little tour. I will not be going in detail on each of the sites in this place, but I want to give you some words about each one of these buildings. So the first investigation, scientific or let's say archaeological investigations done in this site happened at the end of the 19th century. Okay, and the first person who made a map of this site was Maximilian Uhle, or Max Uhle, a German explorer and archaeologist. Okay, so this is a way how the site looked from the air. Notice also, well, this combination of elements, how beautiful this site is. It's like a tongue of land or desert coming into the valley. And we have the valley there also, and the river coming from the Andes, which is also sacred. The mountains, the glaciers are sacred elements for the Incas and pre-Incas, and all of these ending into the ocean. We have islands also there, so very, very important. All of these micro worlds also representing the world of the Incas. The oldest temple in the site is known as the Templo Viejo, or Old Temple, made also completely in mud bricks, because that's the only material you can use in the coast. And also, probably the site or was designed to look from the air like a spondylus shell. So if you see in this little image I down, this is like the design of the temple. It has a very curious shape. So some people believe there was a relation between the shape of this temple and the spondylus shell, which was sacred in the ancient times. And you can see also, well, this is a beautiful view of the temple of Pachacamac, which is the lower temple, and the higher temple is the temple of the sun, two of the most important temples. Later I'll tell you a bit more, but also emphasizing in the material. So the first temple, the Templo Viejo, was built about 2,000 years ago. And this mud bricks material continue in use all the way until the arrival of the Conquistadors. Okay, and the temple that you see here is known as the Painted Temple. The Painted Temple was the home of Pachacamac, the place where finally the Spanish committed the destruction of the god, and it was very colorful. It had lots of colors, lots of designs. The colors predominant were the red and also yellow. And these colors probably were not just random colors. They were part of a beautiful mural, now gone, now destroyed also. The picture you see above is a picture from the 1920s, time when these walls were exposed, but they were not conserved, they were not kept, and they were naturally destroyed by the breeze of the sea. It's believed that the representations were of fishes. So probably the people who came to Pachacamac also were fishermen, or they asked for good fishing to Pachacamac. This is another picture of that old mural now gone. And this is a possibility how the temple looked like from the exterior. So this is what the Spaniards saw, not just like gray walls, that probably all of them were colorful. Also in this site is when in the year 1938, an idol was discovered, and it's believed that this is the appearance of God Pachacamac. So Pachacamac actually was burned by the Spanish, the actual god. And nobody really knew how the god Pachacamac looked like, just from, like chronicles and descriptions that mentioned that it was a wooden deity that was burned by the Spanish later after being cut in two and destroyed, taken out of the sacred space where it lived. But in the 1930s, 1938, well, this probably, let's say, replica of the god that was in a different location, used for ceremonial by these indigenous people, was discovered. Okay, so this is how we know how the god looked like. At least according to most specialists, this is the actual face of Pachacamac. remember that Pachacama has a face in the front, another one in the back. There are elements in one side that recall, for example, the mountains and animals from the mountains and maybe the foxes. And on the back side, there are fishes related with the sea. So this is a deity that controls it all, basically. And a little bit from the distance. Also, it's a quite big, like wooden piece, over a meter and a half tall. Like it's actually close to 2 meters. It's a very, very tall piece of wood, which is made from a local wood named huara. But according to some other specialists, in particular Maria Rostorovsky, one of my favorite also historians and specialists in Peruvian history, she passed away some years ago, but she believes that probably Pachacamac didn't look like that. Like the deity that was destroyed by the Spaniards looked more like a fox. And she also relays in lots of other chronicles and documents and legends also related with Pachacamac. So there is no consensus about the appearance of Pachacamac, or probably there were different forms of representing the god Pachacamac, because some gods were able to, they were like shape shifters, no? They were able to change their shape. But what we know for sure is that that site in particular, the colorful temple or the painted temple, was avidly like looted under, let's say, the banner of archaeological investigation. So Maximilian Uhle, or Max Uhle, came in the year 1896 to the in front section of the temple, the cemetery, nowadays called Cemetery Max Uhle, and he took hundreds of mummies. And most of them are not in Peru. They are in between North America, museums in North America, and also they are in Germany. Especially there's a collection in the Ethnological Museum of Berlin. And surprisingly, my dear friends, there is a monument in honor of Max Uhle right in front of the temple, a painted temple, and the cemetery. Okay, so well, this is one of the things that not everybody agrees with, but basically Max Uhle indeed participated in the finding of archaeological sites, and the thing that most people don't like is the fact that he took pieces from here to Germany, his homeland, no? Like, and it would be lovely to have, but probably that will never happen. Another explorer of this site was William Gretzer, who also found like thousands of pieces. Over 40,000 pieces were taken from this site, and most of them also had precious elements, even gold and silver. Okay, and this is the way his house looked like. Like, look the amount of fabrics hanging. These are authentic fabrics from Pachacamac. Okay, so other temples, for example, in the site that the Spaniards saw. Also, this is just to give you an idea of the site, of the wealth of the site. There were people who were buried exclusively like in that site in front of the temple, just because they wanted to rest with their god. No? And the temples were all active, and there were people, coming here offering their best presents. No? Some of these temples were made, like, again, from mud, predominantly foundation of a stone, and they had ramps going to the top for ceremonies, for different kinds of ceremonies, which were probably public, some of them. So some people were able to get in, but after, of course, the proper cleanse and purification. This is another site in the place. This is the Temple of the Chosen Ones. The Spaniards were not able to get in because this was sort of like a nunnery, if we try to compare it with like a site we can understand better. Only women were allowed to live here, but many of these girls like had different destinies, not just like worshiping the gods of the Incas, or like preparing, let's say, like clothes for the Inca king, or special offerings for the gods. Some of them were given as wives to the very Inca. Some of them were offered as wives to new friends to the Inca, to create like relations with this new, let's say, like dominated groups, so with the authorities of those groups, and also some of them were sacrificed. So these were the temples of the chosen ones, the Adyahuasis. There was one in Cusco and also here in Lima, which were two most important. There were probably some other, but those are the most investigated and most inspired. Okay, and before the Incas, it was of course a very important oracle. Evidences of that are in the potteries that come from different locations in the country, that is still, like you can find here in the local museum. So what you see here, for example, is the Plaza of the Pilgrims, where probably the local authorities of Pachacamac expected the Spaniards to await. They didn't want them to be any closer to the temple, which is the one you see with the roofed section on the left-hand side. Well, that is the location where Pachacamac rested. So the zone that you see here, the Plaza of the Pilgrims, which had a special roofed section, was the place for like a hotel, let's say, like where the people will stay there and receive also information from Pachacamac, given by representatives, authorities, or priests designated by Pachacamac. Well, this was the place where it was supposed to be probably the zone for the Spaniards to meet. But no, the Spaniards decide to go farther, and they got into the temple, and they were able to observe ceremonies that took place in the site, many ceremonies, and they were quite surprised of seeing the power these gods had. Okay, but they were not able to see the god in the exterior because the god was not in the exterior. Okay, so they got dangerously close to the temple. The priest, like tried to stop them as much as they could, saying that you couldn't come in the temple. So, okay, it was enough, like you being here in front of the temple, but you cannot come in. You are dirty. You are not clean enough. The Spaniards didn't care, of course. And that's the moment when Hernando Pizarro puts strength, uses his sword, and gets inside. And the descriptions of the chronicles mention that there was, first of all, passages into this room of Pachacamac. Pachacamac was in a cave, they mention. Okay, so there's no cave here, but probably a room on the top of the temple that accessed into a dark space. And the room where Pachacamac had a door which had spondylus shells. And actually the door with the spondylus shells, the door was founded in the site. So we know this is a historic fact. And after that, well, they got into this dirty room, very smelly, according to them. The smell is really like bad, probably because of the many offerings that were given to the god, even animal offerings probably that were deposited, or fruits or some other products, edible, that were rotten inside the room and they were never removed. And they were able to see with candlelight or with the light of a torch, they were able to see the god Pachacamac, which probably, to their surprise, was not even made of gold. So they were not probably happy with that. Pachacamac was made of guarango wood. It's described just a wood, but probably guarango. And then, well, they decide to take this god out and they cut it in two. And burn it. But probably the biggest surprise of the people was that no earthquake happened at the moment the Spaniards took the god outside. And that is understandable now on our, let's say, because we understand the culture of the Incas and pre-Incas, and we understand how they saw Pachacamac. Pachacamac was the god of the earthquakes. The legend said that if Pachacamac was angry, he just moved the head and an earthquake happened. But if he stood up, the end of the world could happen. And nothing of this happened. So probably the indigenous were quite surprised, and sadly surprised. And the Spaniards say that in that moment, many people converted into the faith. Because probably, like, if you put in the position of the indigenous, well, they believe that, well, the God of these people is more powerful than Pachacamac. So we have to reverence this God. We have to accept this God. And well, right after the Spaniards took lots of gold from this site. It is not really known how much gold was taken, but there was a lot of gold there. After the destruction of Pachacamac, they returned to Cajamarca with this gold. And also, well, this was not the only moment the place was sacked. You already know there was a sacking that happened in the 20th century, in the 19th century, in the 20th century as well. There was more sacking of the site. So, well, now, of course, the site is protected. We cannot take anything from there. And also, moving a little bit forward in the story, Pachacamac, even though was destroyed physically from its home, its temple, many indigenous people from the coast continue believing in Pachacamac for a long time. There are evidences of a cult, let's say a non-permitted cult to the god Pachacamac. And finally, because of the external pressure these indigenous had on abandoning the cult, the worshipping of this god, there is a belief in some specialists, historians in particular, that this god transformed into another one, into a Christian one, which now we know as, well, the god of the earthquakes, or the Lord of the earthquakes, which is no other than Jesus Christ, represented on a wall in the 17th century by a black man who, well, was also a slave who embraced the Catholic religion, and this wall is known as, still by the way, worship in a church, in the Church of Nazarene. It is known as protector against the earthquakes. The Lord of the Miracles is taken out, a replica, of course, of the original image on the wall that is in the church, that is worshipped. A replica painted in oleo is taken out in Lima every October to avoid earthquakes to happen. October is historically the month where most of the worst earthquakes of our history have taken place. So there is a possibility that there is a form of fusion between, well, the cult to the Pachacamac, the Lord of the earthquakes, and also this image that is Christian, reverence, of course, here in Peru until these days, the Lord of the earthquakes, or the Lord of the miracles, as we know it. By the way, I think it was yesterday when the Lord of the miracles was taken in procession in the Vatican, in the Plaza of San Pedro, St. Peter's Plaza. And probably you know that our Pope, born in Chicago, United States, also has Peruvian nationality, and he's also devoted to the Lord of Miracles. So it's really interesting how these two religions, in a way, clash. The Incan and the religion brought by the Spaniards, the Christian, and created a new form of religion, or a religion that has its uniqueness.